It was founded in 1889.
It's called Jacobean because the church was built during the time of James I.
What we think is the premier performance of Midsummer Night's Dream.
It was an idea that was proposed from Lord Derby.
About 15,000 worked in the BI, I think, you know, maybe even more.
We used to give a blast of our rattles as we were going down the street.
Stone Street is one of the smallest streets in Britain.
I've never lived far away, never lived out of the sight of Prescot, and Prescot's always been what I consider my home. I lived on Eccleston Street over the wool shop from being an infant and lived with my family. That was from 1940. When I was at the wool shop, living at the wool shop, I used to wait for the railway horse and cart to come here because this was a grocer's shop. And then when I could see it, I'd run up the street and ride down on it. So that was my earliest memory of Eccleston Street, I think.
I can remember coming up with my mum, and I'd only be about 3. So it's a long time ago now. We're talking 1950, 51, and I can remember coming up the hill on the tram. And for a little fella, it was quite a scary place, to be honest, when you got off the tram. I can remember asking my mother why all the buildings were black. And I got the regular answer when they haven't got a clue, because they are. And it was years later I found out, when they actually started to clean them, it was actually soot. So all the black buildings in Prescot, and Liverpool as well, were only black because it was soot. So you can imagine, it was quite a dark place. It was quite a dark place.
But my first recollections of Prescot was coming up here as a 4-year-old. I used to come up to Garth's warehouse, which was fascinating in them days because it was just full of everything. And you used to walk into Garth's, go down the steps, and you'd smell everything around.
There's a lot of people who work for us who've been born and bred in Prescot, and they never think of going elsewhere. You know, that's where they want to be.
We went to school in Prescot, didn't we? Both work in Prescot. Christened in the church, both married in the same church.
Yeah.
Not to each other.
Might as well be.
And our baby's christened in the church. Hopefully they'll be getting married here as well one day.
There's been a church on this site for over 1,000 years, and this is the 4th church that was built in 1610.
It's understood that Celtic peoples lived here in something like the 6th century, and Christianity was brought here by missionary monks coming from Ireland. And these people came up the River Alt to the highest point, which of course was this area here. They became a group of secular priests who used to go about the countryside preaching the Christian religion. So much so that Prescot became a very, very important place. And by the time the Saxons got here, they saw this community of priests on the hillside, didn't seem to have a name. So they called it Prescoti, which means home of the priest or a priest's dwelling. And that's where we get the place name Prescot from. And in the end, it covered 58 square miles after the Reformation in 1534 by Henry VIII. The church actually went to rack and ruin because people just would not pay towards the upkeep of the mother church because it was no longer Roman Catholic. It was Church of England. And of course the church fell in disrepair, and we had a vicar by the name of Thomas Mead.
And Thomas Mead was responsible for the rebuilding of the church in 1610. But interestingly, a lot of the Catholic gentry were made to contribute to its rebuilding, weren't they? People like John Ogle. And although this is the 4th church on the site, Betty, we do have one artefact going right back to the Saxon church, don't we?
We do indeed. and that is the font.
Right. But the font, it disappeared for a while, didn't it?
It was removed during the time of the Civil Wars.
But one of the glories that survived was, of course, the Jacobean roof, wasn't it?
The Jacobean roof is magnificent. It's the finest black and white timbered ceiling in South Lancashire in any parish church. It's called Jacobean because the church was built during the time of James I. And of course, the Latin name for James is Jacobus. It is made of black oak. Why is it blackened, or how is it blackened? They were used ox blood to do it.
Well, Worcester Hospital started, the origin was in 1843 when they decided to open a workhouse, close all the smaller ones in the area and make this one united one. And from then it progressed, and then they started to take people in as hospital, and they did have a ward there. And then they decided that they would have a chapel built. About 6 years ago, they decided to knock the whole place down. So what we did, we asked them to save all the stained glass and the plain glass.
Two of the stained glass windows we've got are in memorial to Samuel Hartley, who was the clerk of the Workhouse. And what he found over time, that a lot of clockmakers and watchmakers were coming into the Workhouse, and he wondered why. And when he looked into it, what it was, they were coming from abroad, buying up the cases with the Prescot stamp on, taking them away, putting their works in and selling them off as Prescot watches, which they weren't. So he wrote to all the other workhouses and all the local MPs and got everybody on board, and they got a bill passed called the Fraudulent Bill Act. With his actions, the local watchmakers were able to have a bit more work, so they weren't reliant on the workhouse handouts.
I remember my grandparents talking about the watchmaking industry here and how big it used to be.
My name's Dave, I work at Prescot Museum and I'm the curator. I help to look after the collections stored at Prescot Museum. These are two watches made in Prescot. These were actually produced by the Lancashire Watch Company. It was founded in 1889 and it was an attempt to try and rejuvenate the watchmaking industry of Prescot. By that point the industry was struggling. There was lots of imports of watches coming from Europe and also America, whereby they adopted more modern manufacturing techniques. And unfortunately, the watchmakers of Prescot were finding it hard to compete. So they decided to try and set up a factory system whereby all the watches were made under one roof, as opposed to traditional system of watchmaking of outworkers of lots of little workshops around the township. So these watches were made in a factory in Prescot, which was completed by 1893. The Lancashire Watch Company lasted for around 20 years. It produced just shy of 1 million watches in total, so it was a major manufacturer of watches in England. Here we have two of the products. Both of these date to around 1905. This is the man's watch. It's in an open-faced, gold-plated case, and it's just over 100 years old. And it still works perfectly well, still keeps perfect time. It's a keyless watch, so you don't need a key to wind it up. You just wind it up with a stem as you would with any modern mechanical watch. This is the lady's watch, so it's a little bit smaller. It's a silver-cased watch, also a keyless watch, but this time we also have the Lancashire Watch Company's name printed onto the dial. But again, just over 100 years old and it still works absolutely fine. The Lancashire Watch Company that made these watches was actually the last major manufacturer of watches in Prescot. There was a couple of smaller workshops in the town until the 1960s, but by that point the industry was pretty much finished.
I used to be a next door neighbour to Alan Bayman. He had the watch. He used to be the watchmaker in Prescot. So I grew up with him and I used to get all his history around how he was the watchmaker and where he used to work and that.
My wife's got a couple of pocket watches made in Prescot, which she has inherited from her family. I guess they were made around the turn of the 20th century.
My father-in-law's mad on pocket watches. He's probably got about 50, 60, and he loves showing you them each time you go down. So if I do manage to get a Prescot one, I'll give it to him, because I think he'd really, really love that.
In the First World War, it was used as the barracks for the pals. That's where they were all massed and bedded down.
Pals Battalion, it was an idea that was proposed from Lord Derby. He thought it would keep morale up and also aid recruitment. To that end, it was very successful. The first Pals Battalion that he organised was actually the one at Prescot. The particular barracks at Prescot, they went straight in there, and it was the old Lancashire Watch Company building. But unfortunately, when they went into battle, it meant that large portions of towns, the eligible men, as it were, literally got annihilated. So there was quite large areas of towns where the only males left were basically young boys and old men, and also families were literally ripped apart by it.
And then later on, it became what I know it as Tinlins, which was a printing firm, which one or two of the locals used to work at. At the BI, I worked there 2 sessions. The first one, I was like a can lad. It was just general dog's body. It was in what we call the Black Hole of Calcutta, which was the plastics and light assembly department. They used to be, the gate for it used to be opposite what was the John Kemble pub, and there was a doorway, and as you went in, you went down some steps, and you just went into was like a black hole with all the dust of the plastic material and stuff.
About 15,000 worked in the BI, I think, maybe even more.
There's 17,000 at its peak.
I lived in Rainhill, and the journey from Rainhill to Prescot, you made sure you didn't come at around 12 o'clock, because the road was to be just flooded with people coming out of work to come and get their lunch. And I know here we used to have a queue out of the door every lunchtime with people queuing for pies. And the same, if you went past at finishing time, it would just be so busy there. The buildings used to be right up to the edge of the main road. There's a crossing, just outside, and it was just swarming with people.
Watching them come out of the BI at 5 o'clock, thousands flooding out.
It was hard work, but it was the camaraderie in there was quite good. We had some cracking times. There was one particular time that sticks in my memory. Was I was on charging up the furnace with another lad, and what we used to do, throw so much on, then when they started smelting, we had a charge in the bucket, and then we had another charger on the weigh scale. And this particular morning, for some reason, when George started smelting, we actually left and went and broke up some of the scrap which had been brought round to us. And if we'd have stood in the same place as we usually done, we'd have been burnt to death, because when he put the blower on and the metal started melting, the ganister hadn't quite knitted together. What used to be like a hole where they'd put half the ganister in, and then they'd have a torch which set the furnace on fire, and then they'd take that out and block it up with the rest of the ganister. But this morning, the two halves hadn't knitted together, so when he put the blower on and the metal started melting, it all just flew out the hole. So we did have a lucky escape there.
Well, my father used to work there for many years. My father used to odd times take me in to show me different things.
My mum was one of 10 from Prescot, and I think they all at some point had some type of work or employment in the BICC, all 10 of them.
Most of my working life, we've had big factories like the BI, Stovies, Pilkingtons, all around the area. But now, again, it just seems to be going back to more like the cottage industries, where they're like small individual units. There's no big factories as such as I remember, and how I used to do the work. Like in life, you say everything goes in circles. Like, started off with the cottage industry, which we seem to have gone back to now. So most probably the next circuit will bring us back to the factory life again, and a bigger, profitable employment basement. So we'll just have to wait and see.
I was down here for 25 years. I was at Crompton till 1974. I left Crompton to go to Sutton Manor Colley. I was there until 1989, then I moved on then, different collieries. Hard work, dusty, wet, hot. It could be, it all depends what zone you're in, you know what I mean? But very dusty, especially when the machine starts coming in. You've never been down the pits, it's hard to understand. It was a very frightening job, like, especially on the face and that. The face might be 250 metres long. When they moved the chocks, what they call the chocks on the face, what supports the roof, when they moved them in, all the roof just used to cave in behind you, you know what I mean? It's really frightening if you've never experienced it and that, you know. You got low tunnels where it was only like 3 foot high, where you went to other tunnels what was 15, 16 foot high, you know what I mean? You hit different things, you hit water sometimes, and water, sometimes you're up to there in water working. But was on strike for 12 months, which is very hard going, like, you know, and all we used to get was the £3 food parcel. But what we done in Knowsley area, we used to go delivering leaflets to houses during the day. Any food, or like you go back of a night with a van and they give you like tins of food or money, and then we used to make food parcels up every week, and I was in a lot of debt. After 12 months I had to remortgage my house because I hadn't paid my mortgage for 12 months or nothing, so I had to remortgage my house and that. I work for British Copper Refiners, which is all gone now. But that, and I even lived behind down Hayes Avenue, number 11, just across the railway track. And you'd go and see all the smoke coming off the chimneys. And my dad was from Eastbourne. You know, I married my mother, obviously from up here, settled in Hayes Avenue. And he was a gardener, and he couldn't grow weeds.
Them were the days when, in Kingsway, nothing would grow in the gardens because of the heavy metals and all kinds of stuff coming out the chimneys. And nothing would grow in Kingsway and Shoal Lane. The gardens couldn't grow anything.
Say, the copper refinery, passing there in the dark, they had the doors open, you'd see all these multicoloured flames leaping up because they burnt timber. They didn't use anything else at the time. I mean, a lot of the timber would be carted through Worcester. I don't know where it came from, somewhere down in the woods down there. And you see a wagon with all the tree trunks stacked up on it, and they'd bring them up to the BI, to the refinery.
I'm Harry Glover. I'm a Prescotian, and I worked at the BICC for 45 years as a lorry driver.
I'm Lily Glover, his wife, and I worked at BICC for 35 years. I was in several divisions of the BICC and ended up for the last 20 years in Telephone Cables Division. And we've collected over many years a lot of memorabilia about BICC.
When I retired from the BICC, the rest of the drivers presented me with 2 of these, one at the front and one at the back. And they found these, well, they acquired these from one of the BI shops without anybody knowing, and that was my present for retirement from the BICC.
The factory was closing down at the time.
How many years is it now?
Oh, it's been there 30 years, hasn't it?
30 years it's been
It must have been in Telephone Cables Division since the year dot, really. I couldn't tell you because it was always there in my years, I'm sure, since the building was built.
But it keeps perfect time.
It's been very good, really.
See, yeah.
At the BI, it was well organised. We had a lot of sports, a lot of organised sports. And then I started playing for the BI football team, 1967.
Before the war, when I was about 8, Dixie Dean come Prescot cables around. He used to play with Everton. To kick off the match, I think it was between Eighton Rex and another team. And he come out the taxi, And I remember on the board, I looked up at him in amazement. Oh, Dixie Dean, the old England Santa Ford, Dixie.
And we used to go to Wigan, and because Wigan Athletic were in the same league as Prescot in those days, and we used to go to Wigan on the train, and we used to give a blast on our rattles as we were going down the streets of Wigan.
I remember the old stand, because I don't know if you went.
Prescot cables on there. Yeah.
That was supposed to be the first instance of football sponsorship in this country.
But the new one?
No, that's
the old wooden one.
The old wooden stand was built in the 1930s, I think. It was either late 20s, early 30s, by BICC Cables.
That was owned by the presidents of Cables then, wasn't it?
That's right. And that's why Cables play in black and amber. Because...
that's the first industrial history.
Yeah.
Any cable that was drawn,
that's right.
Your electric cable,
yeah.
The first colours was amber and black.
Yeah.
It didn't have a neutral then.
Yeah.
So with the BI donating the stand,
yeah.
They ended up playing in black and amber, and they still do to this day, don't they?
To this day, yeah. Amazing, because I remember that stand burning down. It was about 1960, and it's probably the most successful period of the club.
Yeah, well, they played Darlington, didn't they? In that
played Darlington in the FA Cup.
We got to the first round of the FA Cup on 2 occasions. The 4th qualifying round games against Altrincham and Morecambe were really exciting games.
The BI would have been a major employer in the town. If they played an FA Cup game, they're kicking off early, or if they had an FA Cup replay, used to let them go off early.
That's right, yeah.
So they could go and watch the match.
Yeah.
I remember we played in the 70s, we played Stamford here. Yeah. And it was a replay. They replayed on the Monday.
Yeah.
And the BI let everybody finish early to go to the game, and it must have been about 2.5 hours. Though.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Oh, no.
But they've always had this working background where all the working people, Prescot used to go watch them on the weekend.
Yeah.
It was quite common that when they played Wigan Athletic in the Lancashire combination days, they did take 2,000 to 3,000 by bus from Upstreet.
All those lads that were being in the British Soldier from 1966-67, all when they closed, we all moved up here in the whole football team moved into the Sun Inn, and we've kept here and been friends for 40 odd years, and we now, instead of playing football, we play dominoes, and we run the Domino League, the Prescot Domino League.
Elizabethan Prescot was a really exciting place to be. In 1586, Queen Elizabeth I granted permission for us to hold weekly markets here on a Tuesday. So that meant we had lots of different people coming through the town, selling their wares, swapping ideas and all the latest gossip. So because we've got all these people coming through the town, they all need somewhere to stay, so we get lots more pubs and taverns. Of course, we're on the main road, which is the Turnpike Road, which leads from Liverpool through to Warrington. So because all these people are in the town as well, they all need entertaining. So we've got a cockpit in the town, so there's cockfights going on. And that was actually the former museum building, which was on Church Street. That was built on the site of the cockpit. So of course you'd have people go in there gambling, spending, drinking.
So, you're ready for the cockfight, are you? Well, you've come to the right place. My name's Patch. Nice to meet you. Do you want to know how I got my name? Well, it was last year. I had my prize cock out, and he was ready to attack. Then he turned round and went for me, started pecking at my eye. So I grabbed him, wringed his neck, and then I ate him. It was lovely. My wife enjoyed it too. Anyway, less about me. We've got 2 prize cocks, for your entertainment. Mad Harold and Crazy John. If you ask me, I'd put the money on Mad Harold. Only 'cause it's mine.
Because there was this love of theatre in Prescot, there was actually a link with Shakespeare. I'm not saying he lived or worked in the town, but he's got a real connection to the Lords of the Manor, the Earls of Derby. So the fifth Earl, it was Ferdinando, his title was Lord Strange. He was a really interesting chap. He was absolutely mad keen on the theatre. He wrote poetry and things himself. And he was Shakespeare's patron, so he paid him to perform and to write plays. His younger brother, William, he became the sixth Earl after Ferdinando died in quite dubious circumstances. There was rumours of witchcraft and poison, but when his brother took over, he carried on with this tradition of having lots of theatre. He had his own troupe as well, his own acting troupe of actors to perform. And he had, for his wedding, they had what we think is the premiere performance of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And I don't know if you're familiar with the story of A Midsummer Night's Dream, but it's a play within a play that's being performed for the wedding of King Theseus and Hippolyta, who's the queen of the Amazons. So because of the theme of the play, it's recognising the status of the Derby family and the Earls.
Year 4 of Evelyn Primary. Should we tell everyone at Prescot Museum our 6 best facts about Prescot?
Yeah! In the past, Prescot Mill had a fire, but it never got replaced.
There used to be a company in Prescot called the BICC. Prescot Town Centre used to be really small, but now it's really big.
Everyone's friends in Prescot, and it's a lovely place to live. Maybe Shakespeare wrote a play for Lord Derby.
Prescot is called Prescot because there used to be a priest who lived in a cottage. Prescot is famous for having some very successful authors. Edward Lear wrote The Owl and the Pussycat while he was in Prescot.
Moseley Hall, 1820.
Hi, I'm Lord of Derby, and my grandchildren are really, really bored. If they just had something to eat.
I'm bored.
Me too.
Me free. Later.
Aha, the man for my job, Edward Lear, the famous writer.
Hello, Earl of Derby. I have written a wonderful poem for you. It is called The Owl and the Pussycat. Would you like to hear it?
Yes!
The owl and the pussycat went to sea on a beautiful pea green boat. They took some honey and plenty of money, backed in a £5 note.
My first drink was in here, and probably it'll be my last drink will be in here as well.
It's not really a suburb of Liverpool. It's always been a Lancashire town. It is more akin to places like St Helens and Wigan, Ashton, because that's the tradition of the town.